She thought she was too logical for faith, and he too faithful to be followed. But in the quiet war between doubt and grace, neither stood a chance. One searched for truth behind science, the other for service beyond surveillance. Based on the true experiences of Acarya Krpananda Avadhuta and the devotees he served. This is not about belief, it's about becoming. The light behind the curtain, now streaming on the worker. There are people who meet the master with folded hands. There are those who meet him with folded logic. Prabhat Devi belonged to the second group. The air in Lucknow was heavy with anticipation. A spiritual storm was sweeping quietly through the hearts of many, and yet Prabhat Devi remained unmoved. She was an educated woman, sharp, articulate, and fiercely rational. Her husband, Tyagi, a quiet but devoted Margi, had urged her many times to take initiation. She refused. She listened to his words with the patience of a scholar and the stubbornness of one who has studied too much to surrender too soon. "Why should I?" she would argue. "Faith should follow understanding, not fear, not pressure." But eventually, the tide within her shifted. Something silent gave way. And so, with a mind half open and a heart still guarded, she agreed to learn meditation. Soon after, the couple journeyed to Jamalpur. The train chugged slowly into that now legendary town, the land where the silence between footsteps had once birthed a revolution in spirit. On the way, Tyagi turned to her and, with a hesitant tone, told her, "Women don't usually get personal contact. It's only for men." Prabhat Devi's eyes narrowed. "What kind of guru is this who discriminates against women?" she said, with a flare of irritation. She folded her arms and fixed her gaze out the window. But deep down, something was already shifting. Her logic was bruised, but not yet broken. When they arrived, a discourse was already in progress. The room was packed, yet silent. Baba was speaking, not of heaven or hell, not of scriptures or sin, but about language, the structure of it, the rhythm, the living essence hidden in syllables. It wasn't a sermon. It was a symphony. She stood near the back, absorbing every word. Then, suddenly, as if he had been waiting for her to arrive, Baba gestured for a monk to seat Tyagi near the back, and called for Prabhat Devi to come sit in the front. She was startled. No guru had ever done this. And no guru had ever spoken the way Baba did. Not with fire and fury, but with precision, with clarity, like a scientist explaining the soul with the logic of light. Then, mid-discourse, Baba paused. He looked straight at her and said, "I shouldn't be talking about languages since I'm only a student of science. I'll ask someone more qualified to take over for me." A murmur passed through the room. Prabhat Devi blinked. Then Baba said, "Prabhat Devi has an MA in language. Let her come forward and continue the lecture." Her heart nearly stopped. She looked around in disbelief. How did he know her name? Her degree? She stood up hesitantly, her face flushed. "Baba," she said softly, "this topic, it wasn't taught in any university. I'm afraid I can't speak about it." Baba smiled gently, his eyes twinkling. "She knows very well," he said to everyone. "She just won't admit it. That's her policy." The room erupted into warm laughter, and in that moment, without saying it, Baba gave her permission to sit down. Later that day, Prabhat Devi turned to her husband and whispered with a half-smile, "I've already had my personal contact. Now it's your turn." Their spiritual journey deepened from there. When a DMC was scheduled in Lucknow, Prabhat Devi fell gravely ill. Her body weakened. The doctors were puzzled. "It's not healing," they said. She won't be able to attend. But something happened. 3 days before the DMC, she woke up, suddenly whole. The pain had vanished. Her strength returned like morning light after a night of thunder. She rushed to the airport to welcome Baba. When she arrived, she was assigned as his cook. For 3 days, she poured every ounce of devotion into her meals, ideating silently with every dish. She had no idea Baba even knew. But on the day of departure, Baba turned around and asked, "Where is the sister who cooked these past 3 days?" She stepped forward, trembling slightly. Baba looked into her eyes and asked simply, "Do you feel fine?" Then he turned and left. She collapsed on the spot. 2 days later, she awoke in a hospital bed. The doctors surrounded her with furrowed brows. "You shouldn't be conscious," they said. "You were seriously ill." That's when she understood. Baba had suspended her suffering, held it in his palm so she could be near him for those 3 sacred days. But the blessings didn't end there. She and Tyagi remained childless for many years. The silence in their home was not just quiet, it was heavy. One day, Tyagi broke under the weight. Something inside him dimmed. He felt so hopeless, so burdened, he began to contemplate ending his life. But by some mercy, he went on a field walk with Baba instead. Baba looked at him with calm compassion and said, "Find a certain tree, scrape its bark, mix it with water, drink." Tyagi followed the instruction without question. A strange clarity came over him. The dark fog in his mind lifted. And 15 days later, Prabhat Devi conceived. A son was born into their home, not just as a child, but as a blessing. A miracle. A living testimony to grace. And whenever visitors came to meet her, Prabhat Devi would say proudly, "This is Baba's son." Not a metaphor. A truth she carried in her heart with a mother's joy and a devotee's gratitude. In the dry, sun-drenched land of Gujarat, a lone monk stepped onto unfamiliar ground. Dada Krishnendu had just been assigned to this new post, and the situation was stark. No schools, no office, and hardly any Margis to speak of. With nothing but his orange robes and a satchel of courage, he began the work of Dharma, walking from village to village with quiet determination. At night, he slept wherever he could, train stations, temple porches, dharamsalas. His tour program bore no home address, only care of lines. Station master, postmaster. In the eyes of the world, he seemed like a man without shelter. But in the eyes of the divine, he was a flame refusing to go out. Still, Gujarat was no ordinary battlefield. Unknown to him at first, this was the home state of then Prime Minister Morarji Desai, a man with a grudge against Ananda Marga. Years earlier, a senior Margi, Mr. R. Prasad, a customs commissioner, had exposed a smuggling ring that implicated Desai's own son. The case stirred national headlines, and though political power ensured the son's release, Desai never forgave the humiliation. Now in power, he set in motion a quiet vendetta. Orders were passed. Margis were to be watched. Dadas were to be harassed. Dada Krishnendu's troubles began almost immediately. In Porbandar, the birthplace of Gandhi, a plainclothes officer approached him at the bus station. The man smiled politely, asked a few questions, and disappeared into the crowd. What Dada didn't know was that he had just become a target. That very night, officers were sent to follow him in secret. 2 nights later, at nearly midnight, Dada arrived in Jamnagar. Tired and dusty, he spread his blanket on a bench, ready to rest. But sleep would not come so easily. 3 plainclothes officers suddenly appeared, ordering him to leave the station, even though dozens of others were also sleeping there. As he stepped outside, his eyes widened in disbelief. More than 100 policemen were waiting in the shadows. He was escorted to a bench and surrounded by 8 officers who questioned him for over an hour. When the interrogation finally ended, he lay down to sleep. But he wasn't alone. The police stood guard all night, watching him as if he were a national threat. He kept his eyes closed and pretended to sleep, but real sleep came only at dawn. From that night forward, for 6 long months, the shadow of the state followed him relentlessly. 4 to 6 officers would trail him from city to city, village to village, on buses, on foot, even into temples. If he slept in an inn, a police officer would sleep on either side of him. 2 more stood watch at his head and feet. People grew suspicious. No one dared speak to him, let alone take initiation. The path of Pratcher became a trail of thorns. Eventually, a meeting was arranged with the state home minister, Mr. Vyasa. Calm but firm, Dada Krishnendu questioned the need for 6 men to follow a monk. The minister offered a half smile and a strange explanation. Each officer represented a different intelligence agency, and they were all required to report to the central home ministry every 2 hours. Vyasa tried to deflect blame, saying it was the police, not the government. But Dada leaned in and asked plainly, "Weren't you once imprisoned during the British rule? Weren't you also mistreated by the police back then?" The question struck a nerve. The minister's face darkened. But 15 days later, the police escort was quietly removed. Freedom came, but food did not. In the town of Jazdan, Dada walked the evening streets, hoping for a meal. He first tried a temple, but the priest sadly told him all food had already been distributed. Then he approached the local dharmsala. Again, there was nothing left. The next day was Ekadashi, a fasting day, and the thought of fasting without a meal the night before added a sting of frustration to his hunger. As he walked on, his thoughts turned inward, and he found himself quietly blaming Baba. "Is this my reward for service?" he thought bitterly. Just then, the silence broke. From behind came the sound of footsteps on gravel. A man approached and asked gently, "Swamiji, where are you going?" Startled and still annoyed, Dada snapped, "Why do you ask?" But the man's voice was calm, sincere. "I'm only concerned," he said with warmth. The monk's heart softened. He explained his situation. The man nodded and invited him home. "I am a Jain," he said, "so I eat only vegetarian food without onion, garlic, or mushroom." Dada smiled. It was as if Baba had sent someone personally. That night, he was served chapatis, fruit, and milk. Simple food, but to a starving soul, it tasted like grace itself. The fast was no longer a burden, the hunger no longer a test. In that humble home, Dada Krishnendu sat cross-legged and ate with gratitude, reminded once again that the master walks behind the servant, even through shadows. There are paths the world avoids, too dusty, too empty, too quiet to matter. But sometimes it is along these unused paths that the divine walks, unseen, unexpected, and unstoppable. The DMC in Muzaffarpur was in full swing. The pandal overflowed with margis, bodies shoulder to shoulder, hearts beating in harmony with the rhythm of kirtan. Loudspeakers crackled softly as volunteers kept the crowd in order, ushering in waves of devotees who had waited months, some years, for a glimpse of the master. The air shimmered with devotion and heat. Among them, unnoticed at first, came a man different from the rest. His robes were a deeper shade of saffron, dulled by sun and ash. His hair was long, tied in a rough knot. His feet were clad in wooden kadao sandals, the kind that echoed softly with each step on the baked earth. Across his chest hung a tattered cloth bag containing little more than scripture, a copper lota, and dry roti wrapped in banana leaves. He was a wandering sannyasi, a monk from one of India's older orders, walking the land in silence, seeking not crowds but consciousness. He approached the entrance gate, where a tall VSS guard in full white uniform stepped forward. "Swamiji," the guard said politely but firmly, "please show your registration card." The sannyasi paused, his forehead marked with sacred ash, his eyes sharp but not hostile. "I've come to see the one you call Baba," he said with quiet gravity. "If he is truly Parama Purusa, then he is for all. No one owns him." The guard maintained his calm. "You should have registered earlier, Mahatmaji. The DMC follows a fixed protocol. It's for everyone's safety and sanctity." A few Margis standing nearby chuckled quietly, casting sidelong glances. One whispered, "He thinks he can just walk in and meet Baba?" Another smirked. "These wandering monks don't understand how organized we are." The sannyasi's jaw tightened, but not in arrogance. It was the tension of a man bruised by dismissal. His voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but conviction. "You may laugh, but if your Baba is God, then he does not need a gate pass to find me. He will come." And with that, he turned, not toward the crowd, not toward the exit, but onto a narrow, unused side path. Dust curled around his feet as he walked away, disappearing into the trees. That path led nowhere, the volunteers thought. A service road, nothing more. Hours passed. The discourse came and went. Baba's presence filled the pandal like sunlight through stained glass. Darshan concluded. People wept, sang, shouted, "Bábá Nám Kevalam" to the sky. And at last, Baba emerged from the hall and approached his waiting car. As the driver opened the door and started the engine, Baba paused. His gaze was distant, yet fixed. "There are too many people on the main road," he said. "Let's take another way." The driver hesitated. "Baba, the crowd has cleared." "No," Baba said, his tone soft but final. "Take the path behind." The driver obeyed. The car rolled forward, turned slightly, and began to follow the dusty, unmarked road behind the grounds. No one used it. No one even remembered it existed. No one, except one. And there he was. The sannyasi stood under a lone neem tree, leaning against his staff, eyes half closed. He hadn't moved. He hadn't sat. He had simply waited. As the car approached, Baba raised his hand. "Slow down." The vehicle rolled to a stop just a few feet from the man. Baba rolled down the window and leaned out slightly. "Why so angry, my child?" he asked gently. The sannyasi opened his eyes. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. His breath caught in his throat. He took a single step forward, then folded his hands in trembling namaskar. "You came," he whispered, voice cracking. "You actually came." Baba smiled. Not a public smile, not a staged gesture. It was intimate, personal, infinite. "Of course I did," he said. Then Baba reached out, and with infinite softness, touched the sannyasi on the shoulder. Just once. In that moment, time seemed to pause. The breeze ceased. The heat lifted. The earth itself held its breath. The sannyasi closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, his face had changed. Gone was the defensiveness. Gone was the pain. In its place, peace. A smile, not of the lips, but of the soul. He bowed deeply as Baba's car began to move again. The dust rose for a moment and then settled. The path returned to stillness. But it was no longer forgotten, no longer unused. It had become sacred, because love had walked it, and the man who was turned away at the gate had been found on the path. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the Worker channel. Each video is created as a sacred offering to inspire, to remember, and to walk the path together. You can support this journey simply by clicking like, sharing it with someone who may need it, or leaving a comment below. Every action helps spread Baba's light to corners still waiting to be reached. Thank you for being part of this unfolding prachar. Bábá Nám Kevalam. Love is all there is.